So let's create a new composition, and I would call it text repeater. Text repeater. And I already have a couple, so I'm going to put a 3 at the end of mine. You don't have to do that. We're still working in 1920 1080. We're still working in basically 24 frames or 23.976. And 10 seconds ought to do us just fine. Black background's fine. All the rest is fine. I'm going to hit OK. Now, what we're going to make is we're going to make something kind of like this. I have this word repeating, but I only drew it one time, and I'm animating all of them down together. We can actually tinker with that and do something even fancier if we want, and we'll get to that. But that is essentially the starting place. How do I take text and do something interesting with it? All right, so I am going to type. I'm going to get my little text tool, titling tool, and I'm going to click on here, and I'm going to do repeater, just so that it is something kind of interesting. And you know, all caps would probably be more interesting, so I'm going to turn on the all caps button. And right now I've got it kind of hollowed out. You know how you can go over here on the right side of the frame and you can sort of choose your color that you want your text to be, and it fills with that color? Well, there is a little square with a slash through it, and if you click on that, it'll make your letters hollow. I don't really want to do that in this example, but it was already set to that, so that's what made me think to tell you that this is even a thing. Now only the stroke line, which at this point is 6 pixels wide, is the only thing that would show up. But let's actually make it a color. I'm going to do, well, we'll do red. We'll start with red. That's fine. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn off my stroke line. So I have a nice, clean, very solid letter set there. We want to convert this text layer. Now it understands what a text layer is and gives it certain attributes. So like if we start digging into the little carets underneath your text layer down here in the bottom left, you'll see that there are all the things we sort of expect a text layer to be able to do. What is the text? There's some path options. Maybe we've never messed with that. Well, we have anchor points and positions and scales and rotation and opacity and all those things we've seen going all the way back to Premiere. However, we want to change this text layer to be smarter than just a text layer. What is that? We're going to change it to be a shape layer. So what we're going to do is we are going to right click on it. And we are going to go to the create subcategory under the menu that came up when we right clicked. And we are going to tell it to create shapes from text. All right, so I'm hitting that. And it doesn't really change, although what you maybe start to see is that it puts a little outline around it. That wouldn't be seen on your export at this point. It would not actually show up. It's only there to show you that these letters are actually drawn shapes. And it's showing you the border of them, okay? So that's just a guide. We don't have to worry too much about that at this point. All right, but you'll notice that as soon as we did that, another thing happened. The text layer duplicated itself down here in the corner, and the top one has a star next to it, meaning it is made up of shapes, not actual text letters. And so that we don't get confused, it turned off the text layer that we first converted from, because it doesn't want us to get confused. It's basically saying, oh, you said convert it. I'm not going to destroy the text you made. I'm just going to turn it off and put the new layer, the converted version, on top. So several smart things that the program's doing to try to keep you from getting confused. I like that. All right. So, but that's what happened, just so that we understand. Now I had opened some of these carets to show you sort of what was available to us when it was a text layer. Now, if I open the carets for the new layer, you can see that there's actually a lot more going on. It literally understands each and every letter as almost its own layer. But I didn't have to build all those layers. I didn't have to copy the R to its own layer and the E and whatever. We've done it sort of that way. We've done it the hard way. And I think it was good to do it that way. But now we're going to see that there are basically cheats to doing it that way. And we're not going to have to do that. So to keep from getting too confused, I'm going to take that text layer that I left open just to compare the two for you. I'm going to close it. You may want to do the same so that we're looking at this. Okay, so what do we want to do next? All right, so we've turned this into a shape layer. We right-clicked it, it duplicated, kept the text, turned it off. So we want to add a repeater to this. I probably, by making my text say repeater, have made this more confusing than necessary. I didn't even think about it. I'm going to rename my layer so that we don't get confused. We turned it into a shape layer, so text shapes. Maybe I'll just call it that so that we don't get too confused. Okay, that's my text in shape form. All right, now what we want to do is we want to add a repeater, and there's this little, looks like a play button. It's like a white circle. That means we're going to add a different kind of animation controls, and it's going to open up some other controls for us. So we're going to click on that, and we are going to add a repeater. So there, about 2/3 of the way down is repeater, and when we do that, a new set of controls pops up. We're adding more and more stuff down here, and it gets harder to see it. Now, as soon as I added the repeater, you see what it's doing to my text. You can sort of see the outline around the original, and then you can see that there's several versions of the word repeater now put behind that original set. Now, so in a sense, it made an adjustment just so that we could see that something happened. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you open the caret next to the repeater, you will see that there is a number of copies setting, and there's an offset setting, and other things you can control. There's also now a transform section. Transforms what we've been used to dealing with going all the way back to Premiere. Those are position and scale and stuff like that. If you open the caret next to transform, you will see, as you scroll, I'm scrolling up so you can see it better, that the position for X is not set to 0. So most of everything is set to its default 0 or 100, but position got changed to 100. So in a sense, they deliberately changed one of the variables so that all your copies would not be stacked on top of one another. So if I drag that 100 back to 0, which would have been where it would have defaulted to, you see that I have no way of knowing that it actually repeated anything. So it just basically changed a variable so that I could see it, which is nice. But let's go ahead and set it for 0. So now they're all basically layered in behind the original. But let's go to the Y position and let's pull it down. Give yourself a nice little gap there between them. All right, so I have 3 by default. I'm going to change my copies to 6. And now there are actually a lot more that are off the frame, out of frame, that I can't see. All right, so we've made the text one time, and we've repeated it now across, going down, adjusting the Y. So what we can do is we can actually change the fill across these colors. So what I want to do is I'm going to take the offset and I'm going to move it up. And as I do that, mine ended up on -3. Now I can actually see not all, because I did 6 colored repeater lines, right? We set it to 6. But by moving it up a smidge, I was able to get it. Now it's really touchy. You may actually have to go in. Let me simplify things. I'm going to set mine back to 5. And then I'm going to set my number here. That was -3. What's -2 look like? Oh, that's pretty good. I can see a little bit of all 5 of my text. All right, so that worked well for me. So I was being too aggressive when I said 6, but these offsets are showing me how many increments, like position differences, they are. Now everything here, you'll notice, has stopwatches on it. Stopwatches mean we can keyframe them. So if you wanted these to like rain down from above, well, then we might set the offset so that they're out of frame at the top to start. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to set an offset keyframe at -7 for me. I don't know if it's the same for you. I'm going to go about 2 seconds in, and I'm going to manually set another offset one, and I'm going to go the other direction. I'm going to go into the positive until it's out of frame, and it looks like it's about 5 for me. So now I have a repeater of 5, offset at the second keyframe is set to 5. And as I scroll back, I will see all my little repeated words rain down from above and eventually leave the frame. All right, so we're using offset to move things. It's very different than what we've been doing, where we're like, oh, it's X and Y and Z and all that. Nope, we're using offset, different control. However, When I look at this, I can say, you know, it would be kind of cool if it wasn't all red. Well, we can actually add another feature. You can pull from the add button, the little play button, the little triangle inside a white circle. We can add a feature that gives us a control without having to animate it. So in this case, we're not actually going to animate the color change. I'm just going to go add, and I'm going to change fill. So I'm adding a fill control. All right, so when I go to the fill control and I open the little caret, I can actually set a new color. I'm going to set it for, say, blue and hit OK. And no, nothing happened. Well, that's because I haven't told it how to blend this out across my repeated elements. We have a start opacity and an end opacity above our fill. This is a little confusing to me, but the point is our repeater has an opaque level at the beginning of the repeats and the end of the repeats. So if I go to the start of the repeats and I take that, they're both set at 100%. If I back off on the start one to 0, it actually then changes opacity across the repeated elements. All right, so if I didn't want blue at the top, I could have left it at 100. I could have gone to the end opacity and I could have changed it and to 0. But the point is, whichever one goes to 0 is where the new color is going to start. All right, so play with those. These all sort of tie in together. You're basically saying I'm doing a repeated thing and the opacity of the repeated thing needs to change across it, and use the fill information to actually do that. Because I converted my text layer to be a shape layer, if I was like, let's say I hadn't done all this lovely gradient work, right? And it's just set to the original red. And I go, oh, you know, on second thought, that red is awful. I hate it. I want to change it. Well, you would think if this was still a text layer, you could go back up to where you first selected red here on the right-hand side, and you could say, give me green. And it would change it, and it would change the text color. It will not do that now because that is related to a text element, and this is no longer a text element. This is, in fact, a shape element. So if I wanted to change my whole thing, not do my fancy gradient trick, I wanted to change it all to be green, then I would go down, do all the steps we already did, and instead of selecting blue, I would select green. And then you'll notice that here in the composite level, there is a below previous and same group or above previous and same group. And if you change it to above, all the shapes change to the new color. So yes, you can change your mind later. But this, when it's set to above, will apply it to the whole stinking thing. If you set it to below, then you can actually play with these numbers and you can get it to be a gradient of colors. So a couple different things that might come up while you're working on something and you decide to change your mind. Is it truly too late? Well, technically it's not too late. It's just you have to understand that you can't use character controls to change it anymore. You've got to do it within your fill colors down here. But I like the gradient thing because it looks like a cheesy afternoon special from the late 70s. We're using a add animation sort of feature here, but we're not actually animating the color. We're just saying, no, I want it to apply a color change across the elements, which gives you a nice little echo here. Now, one thing that you'll notice is it's always showing you the original sort of location of where the text lived originally. That actually won't show up when you do your final export. So if I click onto nothing, it goes away. It's only applying that when I start playing with the transformative controls of this layer that it's trying to say, hey, all the tricks you're doing on that layer are based on this original text which was turned into shapes here, and this is the original position. But it's just a reference. It's trying to help you keep track of where things started. But it's not there. If I click on nothing, it's gone now. Let's say that because the whole time I was building it, I kept seeing that outline and I kind of liked having the outline there. So maybe the text falls and when it leaves a sort of hollow outlined version behind. Well, I can do that actually pretty easily because my original text layer is still down here. So let's turn it on. It's my original red. Actually, it's a slightly different red because I was clicking around on it earlier. But let's say I want to make it hollow. So I'm going to say no fill color, but I want to turn on the stroke again. which right now is set to white. So now I have this nice white version of it down here, right? It's already there. Now it's just a matter of when does it come on. So maybe I have it show up right here at this moment where it would perfectly align with the first copies. So it goes boom and leaves it behind. Maybe I do the reverse. Maybe I don't have it come on until the last one. So now they fall, and when the last red crosses, it crosses the center, boom, it leaves a little ghosted hollow one behind. So that's kind of cool. It's a nice way to sort of bring on some text in a fancy way. And I'm using the fact that it kept the layer there for me to not have to do any more work. I just turned it back on and made it hollow and slid it down so that, boom, I have a way to leave the word behind. Kind of a cool little shortcut to doing something. And again, that's literally what happened to me as I was building it originally. I got used to seeing it with the sort of outlined version in the middle. And I was like, well, what if I want that? I know it's just a guide, but how can I make it be there? Well, that's how you do it. It's actually just super, super easy. And of course, if I don't want it popping on, I could have it fade on, however, you can make it as elegant as you want. All right. Now, just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to jack mine up a little bit. I'm going to open up my controls again. I'm going to turn off that ghosted one that I made. Within the repeater controls, we have the number of copies, we have all that stuff that we can mess with, but we also have under transform repeater down here, we have other position controls and scaling controls and rotation controls, all of which are keyframeable. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, let's say that these letters fall, but they also get bigger as they come at the camera or smaller, however you want to do it. All right, so now when I do it, boom, they're following a path. And it looks like it's a 3D move when all I did was adjust the scale within the transform section of my repeater. Maybe I want the rotation to do something fancy. Maybe they all come whirling in like that. That's kind of cool and organic. But the point is, I'm not having to like go keyframe nuts to make all these things move in a certain way. I'm actually just within the repeater controls playing with it. And maybe the anchor point, maybe I jack with that and then mess with the rotation and I get a very different kind. Sorry, look at this. Woo. Now they come whirling in and fly out. And it looks like I went to a lot of trouble when I actually just did a couple of minor adjustments, all of which can be keyframed if necessary. Notice I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to keyframe it. It was already, in a sense, making them different across the entire animation I already had. So yes, you can keyframe it, but the reality is you may not have to. It's just about changing. If I want them to come at me, all I have to do is change the scale and it will apply that scaling effect across the entire thing. I didn't even have to set a new keyframe. It did it for me already, which is pretty cool.